Look, folks, it's not my fault that we've developed a gaming culture that's entirely framed around this idea that you might be able to strike it rich and get famous as a game designer by coasting on other people's work. Hi, folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator, and welcome back to Total Party Skills. I was watching a video by Dungeon Delver earlier this morning where he's reading an article that was kind of edging up towards, blaming the consumers for not, taking into consideration the poor mom and pop gaming stores out there. I'm going to be blunt. I have not stepped foot in a small mom and pop gaming shop or comic book store in at least 25 years. I think the last time I went into a physical bookstore to buy a role playing game product was at a mall in Aurora, Colorado, maybe like circa 2009. Pretty much since Amazon Prime has been a thing, or the fact that you can order, online directly from Palladium Books or from pretty much anybody who's got any sort of actual like company establishment behind them. I haven't really cared that much about the existence of any local stores around me. I find my own players. I don't need to go to them for that. So, like from a purely selfish point of view, like that kind of stuff doesn't impact me. And since I don't have any guilt to be tripped over that, I can see it as actually a rather cynical ploy to get people to pit against each other. It's our fault that these poor little mom and pop stores that are hanging on by a shoe thread are they're going to fail because we're not buying enough D&D products. Well, isn't that convenient for the people at Hasbro? Aside from the used book market and stuff you can buy on eBay, it's hard to get away from Wizards of the Coast and giving them money. If you buy old WotC, old Dungeons and Dragons products off of Drive Through RPG, for instance, as print versions, Wizards of the Coast still gets that money. They are still having their brand be expanded. We need to get back more to the 90s where other games are just as like heavily popular and promoted and people are just as excited. And if these game stores want to survive, they should be embracing the other role-playing games and not, be trying to like suckle on WotC's balls even more tenderly in the hopes that they'll throw them a bone. WotC is abandoning all of us. It's this thing I keep trying to get across. The thing that makes the existing Dungeon Master customer base, why we are obstacles to them for them to be able to fully monetize. Every single person who runs a role-playing game, whether in person IRL or through the internet, through existing ways of doing that, all the players that Dungeon Master is running the game for are people who are not going to D&D Beyond and potentially giving them $30 a month to play on the VTT. We are stealing customers from them and giving them something for free because they don't view D&D as actually kind of a weird extension of board games. They are looking at it entirely as a video game analog now, and video games don't run on a model where one person buys the video game and then they have all their friends come over on the weekend to hang out and play it together. Everyone gets their own PlayStation, everyone gets their own copy of Horizon Zero Dawn, and they get their money from every copy sold. And if they can then sell you some skins or some DLC and all that kind of stuff, the more the merrier. It's an industry that started off making arcade games that were intentionally pay to win because you had to keep pumping quarters into it to survive these terribly twisted deadly Mario mazes and stuff that used to be the kind of norm of what video games were like when it was all 2D scrollers and all that kind of shit back in the 80s. It's always been a cynical business model that's designed to rip people off as much as possible, and they're bringing it to a thing that, while there's certainly a lot of stuff in video games that has been lifted out of role-playing games, I mean, a lot of role-playing game rule systems are actually very fundamental to how a lot of video games are designed nowadays, whether you would know it or not. But they came first, so there isn't a back current here. It goes in one direction, and they're trying to reverse that flow to make the older thing resemble the younger, more monetizable thing. And all the hosting sites online like drive-through individual stores, D&D is abandoning you because you are also threats to their monetization. Every book you sell that someone can just run to players for free is keeping those players from having to go to them and pay them their money. It's also one of the dangers that the other bigger independent role playing game companies, if D&D's model is allowed to work, well, then what's going to stop Modifius and Artal Saurian and everyone else who has the budget to do so to also end up making their own VTT and follow the same model so they can get even more and more monetized? They're missing out. At what point does D&D start looking at other entirely different role-playing games as competition too? Because it's not just you running an OSR game that might be detracting players from going and having to pay the money to play online through them, but any other role-playing game, those players could be playing D&D instead on the VTT. How dare you play Modifius Conan, or whatever it is. That's why we are a problem. And hosting sites and independent stores need to realize that they are just as much a facilitator of Hasbro's loss of potential monetization as the individual DMs. We are your customers, so do what we would like to do, which is sell us products, promote products to us, encourage us to play other products, and help introduce us to other products. We got to wean ourselves out from under Dungeons & Dragons' shadow, because this is not healthy for the community or the industry or whatever the hell it is you want to call it. And especially if you're trying to be a game designer or writer or be anything more than just someone who's playing or DMing at one of these games. We've got to break out of this focus around this one fucking game. The Band-Aids of role-playing games, when we should just be a community that likes to play with adhesive strips. Anyway, I guess that's about it. Rant over. Hit buttons and stay waspinated.